Hi guys, thanks for stopping by my cooking channel today. Richard Blaine here. I'm not going to cook anything for you today. I thought I'd take the day off because I really don't want to do any dishes. But way back when I first started this blog, I also made mention that I'm going to be doing many how-tos and tutorials on many subjects like culinary knife cuts, tips and tricks, and most importantly, knife sharpening and maintenance, because in the kitchen our most important tools are our knives. Now, besides being a highly in-demand world-class chef, well, okay, maybe not, but I am a highly in-demand professional knife sharpener here in town. I've sharpened knives for many of the best chefs in the world. Well, actually, many of the employees of the best chefs in the world. They're master sous chefs and so forth. I've sharpened knives for employees of Bobby Flay, Guy Savoy, Joe Robuchon. When Joe got his third Michelin star here in town, his crew came running to me to make sure his knives were sharp, because if you understand what a walkthrough is like by Joe Robuchon, where do you think Chef Ramsay learned how to be so uptight? So sharpening is one of my specialties. I've been doing it since I'm 13, and I thought today would be an opportune time to start with some basic knife sharpening education and maintenance. So, as usual with YouTube, we have 15 minutes here, so let's get going, and I'll see you on the other side. Stay tuned. So tonight's tutorial, I'm going to start with knife stealing. I'm not talking about taking a knife from somebody and running away. I'm talking about the process of stealing a knife on a standard sharpening steel, or what is more commonly referred to as a honing rod. From left to right, this is a standard grooved honing rod, available in most kitchen sets, and most chefs and cooks have one of these in their home. This is a grooved ceramic honing rod. Okay. This is a smooth ceramic honing rod. And this is a diamond impregnated honing rod. The difference between this rod and the others is this rod will actually sharpen, while the others only true or realign a blade. We most likely will not get to all four of these today, and I might have to do a couple extra videos on it, but we're going to be doing knife stealing. So stay tuned and we can get right to it. Okay guys, before we get into stealing a knife, I feel it's necessary that I explain exactly what sharpening is versus stealing or honing a knife. Taking a steel to a knife is not sharpening a knife. Taking a steel to a knife is realigning a blade. In other words, a blade that's getting bent to one side or the other side, or rounding off like this where you get a shoulder. It's realigning, it's straightening, it's truing. That's what knife stealing is. Whereas sharpening is when you remove metal from a knife, and that's the key, the removal of metal. When you sharpen a knife and you grind on this secondary bevel to make it thinner and thinner at the primary edge, you're taking metal off. You're making that edge thinner and thinner. Now remember, the thinner that edge is, the sharper the knife is. But also, the thinner the edge is, the more susceptible that edge is to breaking. Okay, a knife steel has many names. A honing steel, a file, a rod, but they're all the same thing. They come in various types. As I said, this is a grooved steel. Many people prefer a smooth steel. A smooth steel is okay for certain chores. A grooved steel is fantastic in kitchens for a knife that you want to have cut. Now, there are many different ways of sharpening a knife. You have a cutting edge and you have a slicing edge. A slicing edge is good for some chores, but not good for others. Just like with a pocket knife, a slicing edge is great for food and meat, but it's a terrible knife for cutting rope or any hardcore chores that you might do when you're camping. But a smooth steel has its purposes. It cuts micro serrations into the primary edge of your knife to allow it to cut. That's how come when done properly, you see people steal a knife and then they can cut a tomato really nice because of those micro serrations. It's very fine. It's very fine indeed. The key to honing a knife on a rod is the angle. Now, if you don't have the angle correct, you can damage your knife. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I'm going to point it to you right here, and I'll explain. If you take your knife flat to the steel and then hold it too high and stroke, you'll deform the blade. Now again, if you take that knife and hold it too low to the blade, you will accomplish nothing but scratching your primary grind or profile of your knife. So your angle has to be correct and smooth. And you don't have to use a lot of pressure to realign the edge. Some people use way too much pressure. And what happens is when you apply too much pressure to one side of the steel, the edge rolls this way. And then when you come back to this side and you apply so much pressure here, that edge rolls this way. That's why you don't use hard pressure. But you see people just ripping through. Not necessary. Nice, smooth, even strokes will raise the hair on your edge and realign it and true it extremely well. Another thing you need to consider about steels, and this is something a lot of people don't pay attention to, a steel is made to a certain Rockwell hardness, just as a knife blade is. And Rockwell is something that a lot of people don't understand. Rockwell has to do with a knife's toughness, or a steel's toughness, and nothing else. It's not a matter of edge retention, it's toughness. Now your average stainless steel and average carbon steel knives have a Rockwell of between 56 and about 59. Okay, that's standard. This steel and most other common steels will have a Rockwell between 57 and 62, 63. So this grooved steel, or if it was even a smooth steel, will have an effect on this knife. But here's where a lot of people make a mistake. They'll go out and spend $1,000, well, between $600 and $1,000 on a fancy Japanese knife like an arigutsu, or an arigitsu, excuse me. And that knife is made with a steel called Inami Super, or some other high-end Japanese steel. And that knife tempers out Rockwell hardness at 65 plus. So if you think that if this was an arigitsu and it started to go out of alignment and you were going to tune it up on this steel, it's not going to work, because this steel is only tempered to 62 or 63, and this arigitsu is tempered at 65 plus. The steel will have no effect. So you have to know what kind of knife you're buying, and you have to know what kind of steel you're going to need. Okay, this is something that a lot of people don't do. All right, the trend today seems to be people want to get to knives of a harder and harder steel, and that's all right. The harder the steel, the longer the knife will hold the edge. But then if you don't have the proper abrasives, or if you don't have the proper maintenance tools, you won't be able to maintain your edge at all, and you'll get miffed and maybe put the knife away and never use it again. So you have to understand where you're going. A knife that's made of a Rockwell 65 plus, it's going to have to be sharpened on a ceramic or on something called a borosilicate glass rod, which I'll get into more in the next video. But you need to understand, standard steel, tempered between 57 to about 62, 63. Some of the hardest Japanese knives, 65 plus. So you have to have the right kind of steel. But anyway, back to steeling, the technique, and it might be hard to see. I'll do it this way. You hold your rod straight, you put your knife to the steel, and you find your angle. It takes practice. You'll just feel. If it rolls smooth, you found your angle. You start here. Nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. You can almost hear it sing. Not much pressure at all. Light pressure because the edge is thin. So you just want to realign it. Now I'll show you. This knife is fairly, well, in my instance, it's dull as far as I'm concerned. But I'm going to realign this edge. And I hope you can see this. Okay? I'm not going to use much pressure at all. This is a Japanese knife. This knife tempers out at about 59. So this steel can handle it. This is a Japanese made steel. This steel's a little on the hard side, about 63. All right. And I'll show you a couple of different ways of checking. A few of the ways that I like to check because it impresses people. All right. Can you hear that? I like that sound. All right, another way. Fingernail. Can you hear that? Can you see that? All the way up and down the blade. Just taking away bits of my nail. I do this all day long for people. You're probably not going to be able to see the fact that here's hair on the arm, and that hair is just popping off. You might be able to hear it. Anyway, you might have been able to see that. Well, here, it's on the paper. But another test. You always see the famous paper test, and that's okay. But there are two tests you should try with paper. One is feathering a cut. Okay? Dig into the paper. Feather cut. Okay? Start at the rim. Okay? Start at the rim. Okay? Okay? Sharp enough for you? Okay. This has been done by a steel because I'm using a toothy edge. It grabs everything I want it to. And you can do this as well. Now, if I want to smooth it out and make it cut a different way, I'll take it to this ceramic rod. This ceramic rod, Rockwell's at about 75 or 80. It's almost as hard as a borosilicate, which is glass, and it's almost as hard as a diamond. Now what this is going to do, it's going to polish out the scratches and the micro serrations that were imparted to the knife from the grooved steel, and it's going to turn it into a slicer instead of a cutter. A cutter would be like this, like if you were cutting rope, and a slicer would be like if you were doing sushi. A slicing knife cannot do the chores of a cutting knife. And a cutting knife could light stroke, slice, polish it out. Okay. Get a fresh piece here. Now it's going to cut a little different. You might not be able to tell the difference. You might not even be able to hear the difference. But I can. Okay. Okay. Feather those cuts. Feather cut. Okay. Quick draws. By the way, paper is the knife's worst enemy. Okay. Oops. Okay. There you have it. Basic lesson 1 on knife sharpening. I appreciate you stopping by. Stick around for part 2. It'll be on my next blog post. Thanks for stopping by. Take care. See ya.